Marcus Chen shuffled through the corridors of Station Omega-7 with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who had given up on life. His janitor's uniform hung loose on his thin frame, and his shoulders carried the weight of invisible burdens. The other species aboard the station barely noticed him as he pushed his cleaning cart from section to section, just another broken human doing menial work. The Zephyrians towered over him with their crystalline features gleaming under the artificial lights. Their leader, Commander Veltar, often remarked to his subordinates how pathetic humans were. "Look at this one," he would say, gesturing toward Marcus with one of his four arms. "They call themselves apex predators on their world, yet here he cowers like a frightened insect." The Krillian traders would laugh their harsh, clicking laughs whenever Marcus cleaned around their shops. Their exoskeletons clicked rhythmically as they discussed business deals worth millions of credits, while the human emptied their waste containers for barely enough pay to afford protein paste. Dr. Ziena, the station's Altarian medical officer, had examined Marcus during his mandatory health screening months ago. She remembered writing in her report, "Subject displays typical human emotional fragility. Recommended for low-stress maintenance duties only. Poses no security risk." Marcus had arrived on the station 6 months earlier aboard a refugee transport from Earth. The Galactic Council had designated certain humans as displaced persons after Earth's government had collapsed following first contact. The reality was simpler and more brutal. Humans had been deemed too primitive and violent to join galactic civilization as equals. Instead, they were scattered across the galaxy as laborers, servants, and oddities. Most stations took in a few humans as an act of charity, giving them the jobs that even automated systems found beneath their programming dignity. Marcus rarely spoke to anyone except when his duties required it. He would nod politely to the security guards, mumble "excuse me" when his cart blocked a corridor, and quietly accept the occasional verbal abuse from frustrated alien bureaucrats. His supervisor, a beetle-like Therian named Clix, barely acknowledged his existence except to assign new cleaning sectors. The human quarters were in the station's lower levels, far from the diplomatic suites and merchant districts where important business happened. Marcus shared a small room with another human, an elderly man named Peter, who spent most of his time staring at pictures of his family back on Earth. They rarely talked about their past lives. But late at night, when the station's artificial day cycle dimmed the lights, Marcus would sit on his narrow bunk and remember. He remembered the weight of tactical gear, the precise movements of coordinated assault teams, and the split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death for entire units. He remembered Colonel Sarah Martinez briefing him before his final mission. "Marcus, you're the best we've ever trained. 37 successful operations, 0 civilian casualties, and a perfect extraction record. But this time is different. This time, we need the Reaper." The Reaper. That was what his targets had called him in whispered conversations that intelligence services intercepted. Marcus Chen looked like an ordinary soldier, but when the mission required it, something else emerged. Something cold, calculating, and absolutely lethal. That final mission had gone wrong in ways that still woke Marcus in cold sweats. The explosion that leveled half the enemy compound, the screaming. The way his own team looked at him afterward, with a mixture of awe and fear that made him feel like a monster. When the aliens arrived and Earth's government crumbled, Marcus had volunteered for the refugee program. He told himself he wanted a fresh start, a chance to be normal, but deep down, he knew he was running from what he had become. Now, as he emptied trash containers and mopped floors, the other species saw exactly what he wanted them to see. A broken, harmless human who posed no threat to anyone. They had no idea that their peaceful station was home to one of Earth's most dangerous weapons. Commander Veltar was particularly fond of humiliating Marcus during his inspection rounds. "Human," he would bark, "you missed a spot." Then he would deliberately drop garbage on the freshly cleaned floor and watch Marcus clean it again without complaint. The other species had built their entire assessment of humanity on examples like Marcus: quiet, submissive, broken. They whispered among themselves about the human problem and debated whether Earth's children were worth the resources spent on basic humanitarian aid. None of them suspected that Marcus Chen was letting them see exactly what they expected to see, while something far more dangerous waited in the shadows of his carefully constructed persona. The first sign of trouble came during Marcus's third shift rotation. He was cleaning the observation deck when he noticed unusual activity in the docking bays below. Ships were arriving that weren't on any legitimate manifest, sleek, dark vessels that his trained eye immediately recognized as military-grade raiders. Through his cleaning, Marcus had gained access to nearly every section of the station. His clearance was minimal, but janitors were invisible to most aliens. They discussed classified information around him as if he were just another piece of maintenance equipment. Over the next few days, Marcus pieced together fragments of conversation. The Krillian traders were nervous about something. Dr. Ziena had been treating unusual injuries, burns consistent with illegal weapons testing. Commander Veltar was spending long hours in private communications with unknown contacts. The breakthrough came when Marcus was cleaning the administrative offices late one evening. A Zephyrian clerk had left his workstation active, and Marcus caught sight of manifests listing organic cargo being transferred to the mysterious ships. The departure schedules showed the ships leaving for sectors of space where no official colonies existed. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen similar manifests before during his military service. The trafficking networks that Earth's special forces had spent years dismantling operated exactly like this, using legitimate trade stations as fronts for moving illegal cargo. But the organic cargo designation made his blood freeze. In his experience, that was corporate speak for one thing: slaves. That night, Marcus broke into areas of the station that his cleaning duties never took him. 20 years of military training allowed him to move through corridors, bypass security sensors, and access restricted computer systems without leaving a trace of his presence. What he found in the hidden data files made him understand why he was really here. The station wasn't just a trading post, it was a distribution hub for one of the galaxy's largest slavery networks. And the harmless humans scattered throughout the galaxy weren't refugees being helped by alien charity. They were a product being tested and distributed. The files contained detailed psychological profiles of every human on the station. Marcus's own file was thick with observations about his apparent docility and broken spirit. But buried deeper in the system, he found shipping manifests that told the real story. Humans were being categorized, trained, and sold to wealthy alien collectors throughout the galaxy. The refugee program was a cover operation designed to process and distribute Earth survivors as exotic servants and curiosities. Marcus discovered that Dr. Ziena had been conducting illegal experiments, testing how different species' neural patterns could be modified to ensure absolute obedience. Commander Veltar wasn't just a station administrator. He was a high-ranking operative in a criminal organization that spanned dozens of systems. The worst discovery was in the shipping schedules. Tomorrow night, a massive transport was arriving to collect the current inventory of humans from stations across this sector. Marcus and Peter, along with hundreds of others, were scheduled for processing and final distribution to their new owners. As Marcus made his way back to his quarters, his mind was already shifting into the tactical planning mode he hadn't used in months. The Reaper was stirring, analyzing the station's layout, identifying key targets, calculating risk factors and optimal strike patterns. But this wasn't just about his own survival. Scattered across the galaxy were thousands of humans who believed they were refugees starting new lives. They had no idea they were products in an alien slave market, and most would never have the training or opportunity to fight back. Marcus looked at Peter, sleeping peacefully in the next bunk, clutching a photo of his granddaughter. The old man had spent 30 years as a school teacher before the aliens came. He trusted the system that had placed him here, believed in the kindness of their alien caretakers. For the first time in months, Marcus allowed himself to remember who he had been before arriving on this station. Not just Marcus Chen the janitor, but Marcus Chen the weapon, the man who had earned the nickname Reaper by walking into impossible situations and walking out alive while his enemies never walked anywhere again. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. They thought broken spirits meant broken people. They assumed that compliance indicated harmlessness. They believed their own propaganda about human weakness and primitive thinking. But Marcus knew something about predators that the galaxy hadn't learned yet. Sometimes the most dangerous hunters were the ones that let you think you were safe right up until the moment they struck. As he lay in the dark, Marcus began planning the kind of operation he had hoped never to run again. But this time, he wasn't fighting for a government or a cause. He was fighting for his species' right to exist as something other than property. The station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, and the corridors fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. In a few hours, Marcus would resume his role as the harmless janitor, pushing his cart through the corridors while aliens discussed their business around him. But tomorrow night, when the transport arrived to collect its human cargo, Station Omega-7 was going to discover that they had been harboring something far more dangerous than a broken refugee. The Reaper was about to remind the galaxy why humans had earned their reputation as apex predators. Marcus spent the next 18 hours in careful preparation, maintaining his facade of humble servitude while methodically gathering everything he would need. His cleaning duties gave him legitimate access to chemical supplies, maintenance tools, and most importantly, detailed knowledge of the station's infrastructure that no security system tracked. During his morning shift, he observed the arrival of additional security personnel, Zephyrian warriors with advanced weaponry, and Therian specialists carrying neural disruptors designed specifically for subduing humans. The aliens were taking no chances with their valuable cargo. Commander Veltar seemed especially pleased with himself, strutting through the corridors with his crystalline features gleaming. Marcus overheard him boasting to a visiting Altarian official about the efficiency of their operation. "The humans never suspect," Veltar laughed, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones that Zephyrians use to express superiority. "They actually believe we're helping them. Primitive emotional thinking makes them incredibly easy to manipulate." The Altarian nodded approvingly. "Your psychological conditioning protocols are remarkably effective. The buyers are especially impressed with how docile the Earth specimens become after processing." Marcus continued mopping the floor around their feet, invisible as always. But his mind was cataloging every detail: guard rotations, weapon positions, communication protocols, and the precise locations where the transport would dock. At midday, Marcus encountered Peter in the small communal area where humans were allowed to eat their protein rations. The elderly man was excited about rumors of possible transfers to better positions on other stations. Dr. Ziena had told him he might be selected for educational work, helping alien children learn about Earth cultures. "Can you imagine, Marcus?" Peter said, his eyes bright with hope. "Teaching again, sharing our history and stories. Maybe this is all working out for the best after all." Marcus nodded and smiled, maintaining his cover while dying inside. Peter had no idea that educational work meant being displayed as a curiosity for alien children to observe and study, like an animal in a zoo. That evening, as the station prepared for the arrival of the transport, Marcus made his final preparations. Using his access to maintenance areas, he had constructed several improvised explosive devices from cleaning chemicals and industrial components. His military training had included extensive work with improvised weapons, knowledge that apparently none of the aliens considered when evaluating human capabilities. The transport arrived exactly on schedule, a massive vessel designed for moving large numbers of prisoners. Marcus watched from an observation window as Zephyrian guards began preparing the human quarters for processing. Dr. Zienna was setting up neural modification equipment in the medical bay. The same technology she had used for her experiments would be used to ensure that the humans remained permanently compliant to their new owners. Marcus had read the technical specifications. The procedure was irreversible and left subjects with severely limited cognitive function. At 2300 hours, Marcus began moving through the station's maintenance tunnels. The confined spaces that would challenge larger alien species were perfectly suited to someone of his size and training. He moved like a ghost through the infrastructure, placing his improvised devices at critical junction points. The first explosion took out the main communications array, cutting the station off from outside contact. In the confusion that followed, emergency lighting activated and automated systems began sealing compartments according to damage control protocols. Marcus emerged from a maintenance hatch directly behind two Zephyrian guards who were rushing toward the communications center. His approach was silent, efficient, and absolutely lethal. The guards dropped without having time to raise an alarm. Moving through the corridors that he had cleaned for months, Marcus became something the aliens had never imagined possible. Every lesson in close-quarters combat, every technique for moving unseen through hostile territory, every bit of training that had earned him the name Reaper came flooding back. The station's security forces were equipped to handle riots, mechanical failures, and even pirate attacks. They were not prepared for a single individual who knew their positions, their protocols, and every weakness in their systems. Marcus reached the medical bay just as Dr. Zienna was preparing to begin the neural modification procedures on the first group of humans. She looked up from her equipment as he entered, her large Altarian eyes showing confusion rather than alarm. "Human Marcus," she said in her clinical voice. "You should not be in this area. Report to Processing Station 3 for your scheduled procedure." "No," Marcus said quietly. "I don't think I will." For the first time since arriving on the station, Marcus allowed his true nature to show in his eyes. Dr. Zienna's medical training let her recognize predator behavior when she saw it, and she finally understood what her psychological evaluations had missed. The neural modification equipment was expensive, sophisticated, and completely irreplaceable. Marcus destroyed it with the same methodical efficiency he brought to everything else. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, Marcus activated his remaining explosive devices. Critical systems failed in cascade, plunging sections of Station Omega-7 into darkness and chaos. In the transport docking bay, Commander Veltar was trying to maintain order among his increasingly panicked crew. The ship's captain was demanding answers that Veltar couldn't provide. "This was supposed to be a simple cargo pickup," the captain snarled. "Your intelligence said the humans were completely pacified." Veltar's crystalline features flickered with uncertainty. "They are pacified. This must be some kind of mechanical failure or external attack." The lights went out in the docking bay, and emergency power cast everything in a red glow. In that moment, Commander Veltar finally understood that his assessment of human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. Marcus Chen emerged from the shadows of the docking bay like something out of their darkest nightmares, and the galaxy's introduction to humanity's true nature was about to begin. The docking bay had become a war zone, but it was a war unlike anything the aliens had ever experienced. Their weapons were designed for conventional combat between forces that fought according to established galactic protocols. They were not prepared for someone who treated every shadow as cover, every support beam as a sniper's nest, and every piece of equipment as a potential weapon. Marcus moved through the chaos with the fluid precision of an apex predator in his natural element. Years of training in asymmetric warfare had taught him how to turn an enemy's advantages against them. The aliens' superior technology became a liability when they couldn't identify their target, and their numbers meant nothing when they couldn't coordinate in the darkness. Commander Veltar watched his security forces fall to an enemy they couldn't even see clearly. The human appeared and disappeared like a specter, striking with surgical precision before vanishing again into the maze of cargo containers and maintenance equipment. "Impossible," Veltar muttered, his forearms trembling as he clutched a plasma rifle he barely knew how to use. The psychological profiles, the conditioning, the evaluations, they all confirmed human docility. The transport captain was already backing his ship away from the docking clamps. "I'm not staying for this. Whatever you've unleashed here, it's your problem now." But Marcus had anticipated the escape attempt. The docking bay's control systems, already damaged by his explosives, sparked and failed as he triggered the manual override mechanisms. The massive doors began to cycle closed, trapping the transport within the bay. From hidden speakers throughout the station, Marcus's voice echoed with the authority of someone who had commanded special forces operations across multiple theaters of war. "Attention all station personnel. This is Marcus Chen, formerly Sergeant Chen of Earth's Special Operations Command. You have 30 minutes to release all human captives and provide them with functional escape pods. Anyone attempting to harm the prisoners will be eliminated." In the command center, the remaining Zephyrian officers scrambled to understand how their secure communications had been compromised. Their sophisticated encryption systems had been bypassed by someone using nothing more than maintenance access codes and an intimate knowledge of the station's infrastructure. "Sir," one of the officers reported to Veltar over the emergency channel, "he's accessed our entire database. He knows about the slave network, the buyers, everything. And he's broadcasting it on open channels to every ship in the system." Veltar felt his crystalline features crack with stress. If word of their operation reached the Galactic Council, even their bought politicians wouldn't be able to protect them. The slave trade was technically illegal, tolerated only because it operated in the shadows. But Marcus wasn't finished with his revelations. Throughout the galaxy, human refugees who had trusted their alien caretakers listened in growing horror as he broadcast detailed evidence of their true situation. The kindly doctors who performed health screenings were actually conducting psychological conditioning. The work assignments were training for servitude. The cultural exchange programs were preparation for sale to collectors. On 100 worlds, humans who had believed they were guests began to understand they were prisoners. Dr. Ziena, trapped in her destroyed medical bay, tried desperately to contact her superiors. But the evidence Marcus had uncovered implicated research institutions across dozens of systems. Her experiments on human neural patterns weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a galaxy-spanning program to perfect the domestication of Earth's survivors. In the docking bay, the remaining security forces had barricaded themselves behind cargo containers, trying to establish defensive positions. But Marcus had spent months learning every inch of the station while they dismissed him as harmless help. He appeared behind their positions like death itself, moving with the lethal grace that had earned him his reputation among Earth's enemies. The Zephyrian warriors, bred for honor combat between equals, found themselves facing something their culture had no context for. A predator that fought without rules, without mercy, and without the slightest concern for their concept of fair play. The last of the security forces fell as Marcus reached the human quarters. Peter and the others were huddled together, confused and terrified by the sounds of battle echoing through the corridors. "Marcus?" Peter whispered as his roommate appeared in the doorway. "What's happening? The guard said there was some kind of technical malfunction." Marcus looked at the frightened faces around him, teachers, farmers, artists and shopkeepers who had trusted the system that brought them here. They still didn't fully understand what they had been saved from. "We're leaving," Marcus said simply. "All of us." As he led the humans toward the escape pods, Marcus reflected on the galaxy's fundamental misunderstanding of his species. They had seen submission and assumed weakness. They had witnessed cooperation and mistaken it for docility. They had observed human emotional attachment and concluded it was a vulnerability to exploit. But they had never understood that the same emotional connections that made humans seem weak were exactly what made them so dangerous when threatened. A human fighting for himself was formidable. A human fighting for his family, his community, his species, that was something else entirely. The escape pods launched into space as Station Omega-7 continued to tear itself apart from Marcus's sabotage. Emergency systems failed in cascade, and the station's automated distress beacons screamed for help that would arrive too late. Commander Veltar made one final attempt to regain control, cornering Marcus in the launch bay as the last pod prepared for departure. "You don't understand," Veltar said, his plasma rifle trained on the human. "We were helping your species, giving you purpose, structure, meaning. Without us, you'll just drift through space with nowhere to go." Marcus looked at the alien commander with something approaching pity. "You still don't get it. You never understood what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be what you want us to be." Veltar's rifle discharged, but Marcus was no longer where the shot was aimed. The commander had time for one moment of terror as he realized he was facing something that existed outside his understanding of the natural order. The Reaper had emerged, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. As the escape pods scattered toward different sectors of space, each carrying news of what they had survived, Marcus Chen disappeared into the vastness of the galaxy, but across 100 worlds, humans who had been marked for processing began to remember what they were. The age of human slavery had ended before it truly began, and the galaxy was about to discover that apex predators, once awakened, were very difficult to put back to sleep.